Welcome back to Cryptid Mysterious. Well, everybody, we are nearing 1,000 subscribers, sitting right now at about 968 at the time of this recording. I'd greatly appreciate it if you could help tip the scales and get me over 1,000. Hit that little subscribe button. Thank you again so much. Let's get into today's encounter. This one comes from Maine's North Country. Most of the people in Maine live here for one of two reasons. Either they love to fish or they love to hunt. And I'm kidding with you, of course. But the fact of the matter is that I don't know any man alive in these parts that doesn't do both on a regular basis. One of my personal favorite fishing spots is the Allagash River. In particular, the Allagash Falls. The river provides some of the best trout and salmon fishing in the region. And in my opinion, there is nothing that can replace the sounds and intensity of standing below the falls. Fishing the suds for a real lunker. Mind you, we're not talking about Niagara here, but the falls is simply 20 feet high and tumbles down over a somewhat series of steps as the river continues its way downstream. I was working the southwest corner of the pool on this particular day, with my rod tip pointing towards the northeast corner of the falls. The river and falls here are, for the most part, surrounded by pines, and the sound emanating from the falls is fairly loud. So much so that a black bear actually came out of the timber maybe 20 feet away from me one day, unheard, and scared me half to death. There was no one pine on this northeast top section that stood out more prominently than the rest of the trees surrounding it. And for some reason, my eyes were focused on that tree that day. Now I must say that during most of the time I spend fishing, I am daydreaming more than I'm doing anything else. Generally speaking, I snap out of it when a fish hits my line. I was standing on this rock, working my fly in the eddy of this pool, when my eyes caught a glimpse of something climbing up that particular tree. Frankly, I couldn't believe what my eyes were seeing. It appeared to be something along the lines of a small chimpanzee or gorilla, climbing up and down the trunk of a tree. At times it was swinging from limb to limb, paying no mind to me whatsoever as I stood below it, watching. I stood there, utterly consumed by its activities for several minutes before it descended the tree, moving out of my sight and into the trees below. I should also tell you that the tree that it had been climbing stood 30 feet taller than anything around it. So when the creature made its descent, it was obscured by the 20 or 30 foot trees around it. Just as anyone else would have, I wondered what the hell a chimp was doing here. It just didn't make any sense. By the way, you couldn't just climb up there and have a look around. This thing was at the top end of the falls, which is all rock and rushing water. Not to mention that it's on the other side of the river, so getting a closer look was not by any means an option. I must have been standing in the same spot for at least 5 minutes when, lo and behold, that little rascal starts climbing up the tree again. At one point, it was sitting on a limb in a squat, holding onto a branch above its head, looking at me squarely. The creature was completely covered in dark brown fur, and the face appeared to be somewhat black. I say that I saw its belly because that area of its body was almost entirely devoid of hair. Moments later, it swung down from the tree, from limb to limb, like a circus acrobat, and once again was out of my sight. It repeated this cycle of appearing and disappearing for a period of about 45 minutes, and now every time it went up, it stopped to look at me, knowing that I was now there. I remember wishing that someone else would have come into the falls to share in this bizarre event with me, But that was not the case on this particular day. I was looking at the trees below in anticipation of the creature's next climb when I was certain that I had seen something tall and dark moving behind the limbs below. The area was so tightly packed with pines, both small and large, that all I could get was a fleeting glimpse of color. I was waiting and waiting, when on the other descending side of the falls, a large beast came walking down through the trees, with the little one sitting on its shoulders. The slope which it was walking down was covered in smaller pines that were about 6 to 10 feet tall at best, and its head and shoulders stood proud of the highest trees by several feet. About midway in its walk down the slope, both of the creatures turned to look my way and then disappeared into the forest. I was flabbergasted at the sight of these two creatures passing by me. This was obviously a juvenile with its parent, out for a woodland stroll. When I set eyes on the larger one, I realized the one that I had been watching could only have been a yearling at best. The larger beast stood several feet taller than the highest trees that it walked by, making it some 13 to 14 feet in height, according to my estimation. I remember thinking that the head seemed somewhat small compared to the rest of it, and it sat in a tucked down position between the creature's shoulders. The larger creature was in no way holding on to the smaller one, who was precariously sitting to one side of the adult's head on its shoulders, with one hand on the adult's head. This thing was so large that it would make a black bear look like a puppy dog in comparison. I could see what appeared to be about 4 feet of arm, ending perhaps at mid-forearm, before it was obscured from view by the trees. I now know that what I saw that day was a Bigfoot, and it has changed my entire outlook about being in the woods alone. Well, guys, another good encounter. That one's out of northern Maine. If you've had an encounter with a Bigfoot, I'd love to hear about it, or any other cryptid for that matter. Shoot me an email to cryptidmysterious@gmail.com. And thanks again for coming on by.